Weightlifting number 4, video number 4. I'm going to actually go back to the beginning and talk about grip width. There's some good question from Patreon about this. By the way, if you want your technique analyzed, I have a Patreon level that analyze it as many videos as you want, monthly fee. Again, my credentials of weightlifting are impeccable, of course. I was just kind of kidding about that, especially, as the Olympics are going on. I'm not there, obviously, so I'm not the highest level, but I've been coaching lifting for a long time. I do have some credentials, etc. If you are interested, though, in having me look at your technique and maybe suggest some drills, etc., check that out. My Patreon link is in the video description below. Also, check out my book, Foundational Weight Training. It has a lot of the programming background for weightlifting and barbell usage in general, not just barbell, but resistance training in general. So check out that too. So let's get into this video about grip. Look at grip in the snatch, the clean, and the jerk. The 3 different movements in Olympic style weightlifting, and talk about some of the variances and that ugly word I hate so much, nuance that can occur based on anatomy, mobility. You'll see my horrible shoulder mobility manifest, but that'll give me a chance to talk about some of the adjustments that can be made too. So let's get into it. Starting with the snatch. Okay, let's look at setting up snatch grip. Pretty easy. There's always calculate how far the sun is from the earth and all this other stuff. This is gonna be really simple. Okay. So put the bar in the crease of your legs, bend over with the bar, okay? And then extend your elbows out to the locked out. There you go. That's it. Now the bar is in the crease, so it's in front of the hip bones, as some people call it, ASIS, okay? Anterior superior iliac spine of the pelvis, okay? The coxal bones. So again, I'm showing from front view, just bend over with the bar, straighten your arms out. There's your grip, all right? Now, if you find your wrists hurt, some of you have really long arms, or maybe even your collar to collar already, okay? And you're like, man, that hurts my wrist. Bring the grip in. Okay, start with the finger width, bring it in, see if that feels okay. Just know that when you do that, the bar is going to slide down on your thigh. You're going to have to lean back a little bit more, pull a little bit longer. So I'm doing a secondary check here. And so what I'm doing is I want to make sure that when I lift my leg up, the bar does not slide down my thigh, yet I am making contact with my thigh. Okay, so as I do that check, again, it should still be in the crease of my legs, but notice the bar and my elbows remained locked. I didn't slide down. All right, so it's just another way of checking if your grip was too narrow. I'm exaggerating, of course, the bar is going to slide down your legs. Okay, we don't want that because then it's going to be bumping off your thighs. If the bar is too wide, then you make no contact with the thigh and you're going to be pulling up in your belly. That's not going to feel very good once you start making contact in the hip. All right, so keep it simple when it comes to grip. Set it in the crease, bend over. Okay, again, this is just from the front view. You can see if it was too narrow and if this was way too wide. My PVC pipe's not very long. You can see I'm not even making any contact. Okay, so simple way to set up your snatch grip and then adjust from there. Most of the time, it's like, man, my wrists really hurt when I'm too wide. I wouldn't mess with wrists. That's always my advice on wrists. There's some great wrist warm-ups, but don't mess with them, meaning I'll be fine. Bring it in for a little while to where you don't have pain. Even if you are hitting a little bit lower on your leg, if anything, it's going to teach you to pull a little bit longer. And then as you feel more comfortable, you can wander out there. Okay, you may find that you never get out there. Okay, well, fine. Then you just have to pull a little bit longer in order to get the bar in the crease. But that's what I just showed you here is a great place to start, and then adjust from there. Let's go on now to the clean. So let's talk about the clean now. Clean grip, and I have little T-Rex arms, so I have short arms, long torso, and short arms. Where the bar ends up on your leg is going to be dependent on your anatomy. Okay, so if you have really long arms, you could be standing up with the barbell and the bar will be down here, mid-thigh. If you have short T-Rex arms like me, it could be in your hip, okay? There are hip cleaners, so that purposely bend their elbow before they start their pull. You don't want to bend the elbow as you're pulling, but, starting in a bent elbow is probably fine. I say probably because it depends on the person if they can hold that weight, right? But you'll see successful lifters many times in the snatch also holding that bent elbow position. And so what I'm getting with the clean, I'm just showing kind of bend over now. I have to bend over in order to get the bar to mid-thigh, where some of you with longer arms and a shorter torso might find that the bar is already lower, okay? You're going to have to tinker with your grip, all right? So if you have short arms like me, if the wider you go, the harder it is to rack it because you don't have as much arm, all right? So if you're a short arm person, you might find that you're more efficient too in having the hands a little bit closer. Again, just outside the thighs, a typical stance. Again, there's a whole lot of things you can manipulate here. You could have a little bit wider stance, but as a shorter arm person, if you go too wide in the stance, that's going to eat up your arm. If you have great shoulder mobility and can rack the bar with a little bit wider grip, fantastic. But for most of short arm people like me, having a narrower grip is going to be a better idea to give you some arm to be able to rack. So if you go wider here, now my elbow, as a result, by going wider, which is a good thing in the jerk, it's going to go down more, right? I'm not going to have as much range of motion. That's what I'm saying. If you have really good range of motion, it's possible that you could still have a wider grip with shorter arms, more unlikely. If you have longer arms, you could have a narrower grip too. It's just the bar is going to hit a little bit lower, and the tendency to loop the bar is going to be greater. You just got to work on making sure you're breaking elbows, gorilla arms, elbows are breaking up rather than out, and you're not looping the bar out. Obviously, it's going to take you longer to fold the arm. So if you have really fast elbows, fantastic. If you want to shorten how far the elbows have to travel, okay, and be able to elongate your pull, in other words, get to full extension a little bit more before you hit the thigh, then you're going to widen your grip. So again, this is where you have to tinker with grip. Unlike the snatch, where it's like we want to hit the crease for the most part, the clean is going to be like, oh, what's your anatomy like? So in summary, if you're a short arm person, more than likely your grip is going to be narrower. If you have great shoulder mobility and short arms, long torso, right, then you might be able to get away with a little bit wider grip because you have the ability to rack the bar. If you have longer arms and you have fast elbows, okay, and you get your pull right and you don't feel like you need to extend real long into your pull, you're pretty strong through a shorter range of motion, then you could get away with a narrower grip. I would say, if you're a long arm person, tinker with this, move your grip wider and see how much shoulder mobility you have in order to be able to rack the bar and eat up some of that arm before you start. So there's not as much arm to fold, and as a result of moving the grip out like I did here, exaggerating, I'm going to be able to pull the bar longer, okay? So the bar is going to be higher up in my body. I'll be able to get taller when I pull. I can get more pull out of the bar. I can pull longer, okay? I hope that makes sense, because if I go from the side here and I had long arms, the bar might be down here. And so that's great off the initial pull off the floor because you're nice and upright. The bar doesn't have to go very far. But you may have as a result, you're going to have a longer bar travel here, so you're not going to pull as long. So by shortening the arm, you're going to eat up some of that arm, and you'll be able to see how the bar raised up on my hip here, right? I'm going to be able to pull longer. Be able to pull, the bar is going to be higher up on my body when I finish my pull, okay? Again, if you have shoulder mobility, this is a good idea. If you have long arms, eat up those arms. If you're somewhere just, your average arm length, and I'm showing a hip clean here, you could purposely try to bend the elbow to start in order to get the bar to the hip. Hip cleaning is great. I don't teach it though. Some people just naturally do it. Like it feels really comfortable for them because they have a little bit shorter arm. Cool. Just the tendency now is that you might see some rebound. This is quite a bent arm here, by the way, but you might see some looping of the bar. So I wouldn't advocate this style, but it is a style. Okay. We typically want to keep those arms nice and long. Again, I'm just showing pulling the bar up in the hip here. Okay. So again, here's the wider grip, and just making sure that you have adequate shoulder mobility when you go into a wider grip. So that's something I tinker with, certainly. Your width of your stance here is going to dictate your hands. So if you go wider with your feet, your hands are going to be wider. I talked about in the other videos about, pushing the knees out to the inside of the arms. Again, these are things you have to tinker with, but at least when it comes to grip, those are some things you can at least think about. A narrow grip might be better for short arm people, a wider grip for longer arm people. Again, taking into account all the different things, shoulder mobility boundaries as well. All right, let's move on to the jerk. Okay, so keep in mind my horrible shoulder mobility here, but let's look at the different grips that can to play around with the jerk. Now, most people when they start out are going to be narrower. So in other words, their clean grip is their jerk grip. Okay, so you finish up here. This is my clean grip. The bar racks up top. Again, my shoulder mobility is not very good. That's why I see a lot of wrist extension here. I definitely would need to work on opening my shoulders up to allow the elbows to come up higher. But I would jerk out of this grip. Again, fingers on the bar, thumb around the bar. You don't want the bar on your fingertips like it is where I have it because my shoulder mobility. Okay, you want it more in the crux of the hand here. Okay, so when you go overhead, you don't feel like you're on the tip and then trying to close your grip. All right, but this for most people is where you'll start out. Okay, the nice thing here is you don't have to make any grip transfers. Right, so you'll see a lot of lifters when they come up, they have a little explosion at the top and they pop the bar off. That's really helpful when you have a heavy load on you. You get the bar up close to your neck on those carotids. You get a little blood flow to the head. You get a chance to, and with the heart going as hard as it is, you get some blood flow to the brain to keep you awake. It also gives you a chance to breathe, but it also buys time to slide. I've ever seen some of the Colombian lifters though. I had one lifter that could do it, and it was comfortable for her. So just leave the bar on her shoulders and then widen the grip while the bar was just sitting on her. I think Kane Wilkes does that as well for the United States. Pretty impressive to be able to rack it. And be able to move your hands out. And we'll talk about this is what this grip looks like from the side. And what I want to emphasize here is when I pull in, I want the lats engaged. Here's lats again, right? Again, understanding my wrists look like they're about ready to snap in half because my shoulder mobility, my elbow should be higher. If this was me, I'm coaching me, I'm going to spend a lot of time on getting my shoulder flexion here when I'm into, right, the rack position. I have short arms, so if you have short arms, you're really going to make sure your shoulder mobility is maximized more than even somebody who has longer arms. I want to engage the lat, though, so I stay nice and tall. Okay, when I drive, I want the bar tip, hip, and ankle to stay in alignment. I don't want the hips to go back. I don't want to squat the bar, right? I don't want the hips to go forward. This is a knee-dominant movement in a jerk drive. Okay, and I've talked about it in this other video. I'm just focusing on grip here. Okay, but lats engaged, abs engaged, so I don't have the arc in my back, but my lats are engaged here. The bar is up nice and tall and in my chin. Again, this is a traditional grip that most people will start with when they're not ready to make transfers. Okay. Now, when you start to lift for a while, I always encourage my athletes to start to mess around with widening the grip. So this is a wider grip for me now. I'll let the bar sit in as much as possible. I have women's bar here. My shoulder mobility is so bad, a women's bar can't press it down. Men's bar even has a hard time doing it. But what I've done now is my chin is back, right? Is my grip is wider and my elbows are down. So this is like I would say this is an optimal jerk grip. Again, my shoulder mobility is awful, so the elbow should be pointed down more in this direction, not straight down. You'll see some people that can do that, but we want to keep a little bit of a shelf, right? The bar is up here, and this is how I actually will have to jerk because my shoulder mobility is so bad. But the elbow shoot up just a little bit, so you have like a 45-degree angle going through here. Where your traditional, if you have longer arms, your elbow might be pointing straight out like you're doing a front squat. And again, that's fine to start with as long as you're engaging the lats and your abs are tight. But as you get going, you want to move towards, having the elbows come down and widen the grip while still maintaining that lat engagement. Okay, and one of the reasons that you want to do this, and I'll show that at the end here, is this is an efficient elbow now. So when I press the bar, or when I jerk, execute the jerk, my elbows are already almost underneath the bar, and so I don't have to unfold my elbow in order to jerk. They're already underneath the bar, just slightly in front, right? And so when I jerk, my elbows just simply extend instead of what I call unfolding the elbow. Okay. Yeah, that's yeah, and there's a little boiler shot for you there. Cool. I'm just trying to show the efficiency of having an elbow. So if you start out and you're like, man, that feels really uncomfortable rack. When I work on transitions, the way I treat people as they come up, some people launch the bar. I wouldn't recommend not doing that because that thing comes down and it crashes. Right. So you just want enough to pop it off your shoulders and slide the hands out. And what you can do is put some tape around the bar and ruffle the ends of the tape so you can feel where your pinkies are. Just take an empty bar or a really light bar and work on that clean grip. Come up just out of a half squat and pop the bar up and slide out. See if you can hit that mark every time, right? So you can feel your pinkies slide out to that tape mark every time. And after a while, that's your new grip, right? For the jerk, you have a clean grip and then you have a jerk grip, okay? And that might take time. As you're starting to learn, if you're just learning how to lift, don't mess around with that too much. But as you start to lift and you're like, how can I be more efficient with my elbow? That's the way to do it. Now, you can go even wider, okay? So I have a lifter that has extra long arms. If you watch the Colombian lifters, I think almost every single one of them use this wider grip. And the reason is that the bar doesn't have to go as far, okay? So the boiler, they're not accounting for the boiler here. The bar doesn't have to go as far because my grip is wider. So the total bar displacement is less. So it has to go farther. Here you can see it kind of disappear out of the picture here. Here it's well within the picture still, okay? So the advantages, disadvantages of doing something like that, okay? If you're a wider grip, bar doesn't have to go as far. Downside is you're more apt to have an elbow bend, all right? You're more apt to have elbow break, okay? When you have a regular grip, your elbows are stacked more underneath your wrists, and so you have less chance of a press out or I would say more of a rebend, okay? So this is going to set me up for a rebend. That bar comes down, I don't have a lot of mechanical advantage and stacked joints in order to see this happen. So I do your traditional, clean grip. Again, my hands are not in a great position. I need to work on my shoulder mobility, but I have to unfold my arm, exaggerating here, unfold my arm in order to extend rather than having that efficient elbow, right? When the elbow's forward, it's such a more efficient pattern to have the elbow under the bar to start, okay? So where do you put your hands? It depends, okay? For starters, most will start with clean grip. Over time, migrate the hands out until you get that elbow slightly in front of the bar, about a 45-degree angle, cutting down, from the side like I highlighted earlier. And now you still maintain that rack position, the elbow in front of the bar, so you don't lose the bar forward, and be able to have a more efficient elbow to finish the jerk with the elbow under the bar. And then if you really want to go ultra wide and play around with that, especially if you have long arms, it's not a bad idea to mess with it and see if you can eat up some of the arm by going longer. But I've had lifters and seen lifters that have really long arms and they end up really narrow in their grip, and they do just fine. So these are things you need to play around with and find what works for you. The better drive you have, okay, and even to some degree how faster you are, you can get away with a narrower grip if you have long arms. If your drive isn't as good, but you still have a lot of speed, you might find that you don't need to elevate the bar very much. You can get underneath it, so maybe a wider grip is better. Again, these are things you have to play around with based on what kind of jerk drive you have. Is it more of a strength jerk drive, or is it more of a dynamic jerk drive? If it's more of a dynamic jerk drive, you're probably going to be able to get away with a wider grip. All right. Again, I hesitate to say if you are this, then you should do this. It's if you are this, then maybe play around with this, right? If you are long arm, maybe play around with a wider grip, right? It doesn't mean that you end up in that particular stance, but it's worth tinkering with after you've been lifting at least 6 months consistently. Don't mess with a lot of these smaller things that are bigger in the long run, but they're smaller right now. If you're just learning how to jerk, don't worry about it too much. Just do what's comfortable. If that rack position initially is the most comfortable, but as you start lifting for a while, start to look at how to become more efficient and starting to widen into this, and your shoulder mobility is good. If your shoulder mobility is good already, maybe you can go a little faster, but making sure your shoulder mobility is good, you understand how to keep the bar up on your shoulder and rack it properly and maintain that rack as you go through the dip. All those things are still solid. Then you can start to widen your grip and play around with it. Okay, but you should have 2 grips. Most people should have 2 grips for the clean and jerk. Okay, should. It doesn't mean always, but should. They'll probably have a wider jerk grip, even just a little bit more. Okay. I don't want to be committed to something completely, but that likely will happen. Unless you have somebody like me, even that's his T-Rex arms, I'm going to have a little bit wider jerk grip than I would a clean. All right. Talking in circles. Play around with these grips. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Like this video if you like it, if it was helpful to you. And again, I'll see you in the next one.